Welcome to the Alex Salmond Show for a very special programme featuring the world-famous media mogul from hit TV series Succession, Dundee-born Logan Roy, played by Dundee-born Brian Cox. Now, back in 2019, media company HBO threw zillions at the final season of Game of Thrones, only to have another of its productions knock it into a cocked hat and sweep the television awards. That show was Succession. Jesse Armstrong's seductive black comedy drama about a billionaire media family headed by its ailing but still dominant patriarch, Logan Roy. Today we interview the actor who, after 60 successful years in show business, has become an overnight superstar, Brian Cox.
At the start of the series, I was born in Quebec, Canada, and I played it with a kind of American-Canadian accent, and I played most of the series with that. And then they decided in episode 9, after I had filmed episode 9, Peter Friedman, who plays Frank, who I keep firing and rehiring. So they changed my birthplace. He said, "Oh, Brian, they've changed your birthplace." And I said, "Really?" He said, yes, you're not born in Quebec anymore. And I said, "So where am I born?" And he said, "Somewhere called Dundee, Scotland."
That exclusive interview coming up. But first, to your tweets and comments on last week's show on COP26, the Global Saving Climate Conference now playing in Glasgow. Susan says it's actually very simple: stop the greed. Jay Willis says we'll never stop it, but we can at least treat our Mother Earth with dignity. Change must come. Carol says, sad to hear about the many missed opportunities. Very informative programme discussion. Robert says, shocking that this has been a success by Scotland, referring to the carbon capture project idea, but at every turn, Westminster's mysteriously adapted things to make Scotland a loser. Anita says, my husband worked at Long Annet for 34 years and was made redundant when it had to close due to the carbon capture being cancelled. Gordon McKenzie says, fascinating. That was Science for Dummies masterclass. Thank you to the two learned professors. Gordon Merrily says, I fear it's going to be Cop-Out 26, with leaders of the so-called big nations all patting each other on the back, and the smaller nation leaders leaving bitterly disappointed. And finally, Heart Mag says, will just be a lot of hot air and lip service. Now, Brian Cox began his acting career at Dundee Repertory Theatre. After 60 years of award-winning success on stage and in film, he won a Golden Globe, playing the profane, taciturn media magnate Logan Roy. This week has seen the publication of his autobiography, Putting the Rabbit in the Hat. Alex catches up with Brian Cox.
I'm now delighted to be joined by Logan Roy, or Brian Cox. Brian, welcome back to the Alex Salmond Show.
Nice to see you.
Brian, there have been many cases of actors who worked for decades to become overnight successes. But you're an example of somebody who's been a success for the best part of half a century, but now you've become, all of a sudden, a superstar. I mean, a totally recognisable international figure. Now, how is that impacting on your life as a person as well as an actor?
Well, there's you know, it's great in many ways, but it's also, the sad thing is I've now lost my anonymity, so people know who I am, and they're constantly asking me to tell them to do a certain thing, F off, basically. Could Mr. Cox, could we just video you telling us to F off? And of course, it's the easiest thing in the world is to say F off, you know. So it's kind of odd. It's a very odd situation. But of course, there are other things which are nice. You know, there's a lot. The good outweighs the bad.
But I mean, do people think of you as Logan Roy? I mean, are they expecting you to be tough for braces, taciturn and offensive?
Some people are intimidated by me, which isn't a bad thing, because they think I'm Logan Roy. I mean, it's like I was reading something this morning, and this bombastic, this supercilious, this megalomaniac man, you know, and I thought they were talking about me, and I thought, I'm nothing like that. And then I realized they weren't talking about me, they were talking about Logan, my evil twin.
Well, one last question on this amazing success in Succession, well into the third series. I'm watching it, and it appears that Logan's got a wee bit of vulnerability as his dysfunctional family seem to be combining against him.
I'm a great defender of Logan. I mean, you must never judge your character one way or the other. You know, that's rule number one when you act. But I look at Logan and I think, you know, he's coarse, as we say in Scotland, very coarse. He's you know, he's free with his language. But all he's trying to do is find a successor for his firm. It may be a horrible firm, but that's all he's trying to do. And he's hoping it's going to be his kids, but his kids are being, you know, persistently disappointing. So it's very hard for him in many ways. So I actually have a lot of sympathy for him because, you know, yes, he's ruthless. Yes, he's a tough businessman. Yes, he talks about being a killer and all of that stuff. But that's all part of what is really, and he says it very early on, this is a game. It's an elaborate game. And of course, when you play any game, you have to play it seriously. But it is a game. But the kids, they don't see it as a game. They see it as a matter of life and death. And so it's very hard for him to kind of extricate them from that belief system. And therefore, and now they're just behaving truly appallingly. And I think, yes, he's under a lot of pressure. He's had a stroke. He's trying to get his family, he's trying to get his firm together. And the children are not helping at all. And with their ambition and also this is the other thing, which of course it's a satirical element of the piece, this sense of entitlement, you know, and this entitlement leaves a lot to be, you know, considered. I mean, that's something that's happening all the world over now. You know, we've got these things called influencers in the media business. So everybody thinks they're entitled now, and you go, no, you're not. And then out of that, we have this woke and cancel culture. And it's become really kind of like liberal fascism that's happening at the moment, you know.
And how Scottish is Logan Roy? I mean, does he make secret visits back to Dundee in the holidays to look at his country of his birth and his homeland?
I mean, the whole Dundee trip, I mean, what you have to understand, Alex, that at the start of the series, I was born in Quebec, Canada. And I played it with a kind of American-Canadian accent. And I played most of the series with that. And then they decided in episode 9, after I had filmed episode 9, Peter Friedman, who plays Frank, who I keep firing and rehiring, said he'd just done an ADR session. Now, ADR is when you do dubbing, when you post-sync words on the screen, you know, that they want to put in. So they changed my birthplace. He said, "Oh, Brian, they've changed your birthplace." And I said, "Really?" He said, yes, you're not born in Quebec anymore. And I said, "So where am I born?" And he said, "Oh, I don't know." He said, "I can't remember." And then he took his device and he said, "Oh, here we are. Yes, somewhere called Dundee, Scotland." And I went, "Well, that's where I'm from." And he said, "Oh, yeah? Well, apparently you are from there, Dundee, Scotland." And I said, so I went up to Jesse Armstrong and I said, "What's going on? I mean, for 9 episodes, I've been playing this character, and now you tell me I'm from my hometown." He said, "Oh yeah, we thought it'd be a little surprise." I said, "It's a hell of a bloody surprise. For 9 episodes I've been playing as someone." He said, "Oh, it's okay. You left Dundee when you were very young and you came to Canada. You went back, but you came to Canada at a very young age." So that was it.
Now, without giving away too much of the upcoming series, is Logan going to triumph over his enemies? Is there life in the old dog yet? I'm cheering him on.
You'll just have to watch and see.
Brian, let's explore a bit about your remarkable 60 years in the acting business. It strikes me that, I mean, are we losing kind of working class edge in actors? I mean, one thinks of people of the 60s and 70s who emerged like Michael Caine, Sean Connery, Peter O'Toole, all from real working class or humble backgrounds, like yourself. Is the acting, certainly in the UK, becoming a bit gentrified now?
Well, it has been moving that way in many ways. I don't, you know, it's very hard to, you know, it's very easy to accuse, you know, the public school system because they have a lot of money, so they have fantastic theatre resources. I mean, apparently the theatres both in Harrow and Eton are phenomenal. And of course, kids get into that. Eddie Redmayne, Benedict Cumberbatch, Dominic West, they're all public school boys. And that's fine. I've got nothing against that. Alec, what you have to understand, you're a wee bit younger than me, but what you have to understand is the 60s was the time of tremendous social mobility. There was never anything like it. There's never been anything like it since, and there certainly wasn't anything like it before. Because, as we rightly said, that the great cry was 13 years of Tory misrule, which was after the Labour government lost their seats immediately after the war. They were in power, then they lost it, and then it was 30 years of Toryism. But out of that became this desire, and of course there were these theatres like the Royal Court, which were creating new writing, and they were open to actors from all classes coming on board, but mainly they were edgy more to the humbler classes. So when I saw Albert Finney, who was my great hero, when I saw him do Saturday night and Sunday morning, because I wanted to be an actor, but I always wanted to be an American actor. That was my fantasy as a kid. But when I saw him at the Plaza Cinema in the Hill Town in Dundee, and he was 24, I was 14, I suddenly thought, oh my God, it's possible. It's possible. And then I got this lovely job at the Rep, which was purely happens chance that I got it. And I worked there for 2.5 years and had the best time of my life. And I was very prepared to go to drama school. And when I went to drama school, I had a grant, I had all my expenses paid, and also a living allowance. I had £11 a living allowance, which was unheard of. No, unheard of at all. It's so punitive now what happens to kids, and we were in a far better, worse off time at that time economically than we are now. So it's kind of odd to me that this has happened, and that gentrification has moved in a big way, and it's happened in London. You can see it in London now. Young people have to share houses, whereas they could have a decent flat. I hear of seven kind of young couples sharing a house where they have to share bathrooms and everything, and it's got so out of hand because of the monstrous rise in property prices, for one thing, but also in education too.
So is there a Scottish exception to that? I mean, if you look across the arts, one thinks of Martin Compston, Elaine C. Smith, Gerard Burns in painting. These are all very humble backgrounds and people have broken through.
They are. And the climate in Scotland has always been towards that. Scotland is very generous in that way. And thanks to what you did with free university education, if you're a Scot, that's kept, I'm a socialist. I believe in egalitarianism. I believe that we're all, as they say in Scotland, we're all Jock Tamson's bairns, and we all need that equal opportunity. Unfortunately, some people are more equal than others, and that's what's happened, and it's happened in the theatre, and I think it's really sad.
And I mean, one of my great heroes, of course, Brian, was Harold Wilson, and I always regarded Wilson. Well, Wilson had two great achievements. One was keeping Britain out of Vietnam, but the second was the Open University, of course, and what that meant in terms of access to education. So are you saying that certainly in England that we're losing that access, we're going into reverse on social mobility?
Well, it looks like it. It's certainly from the arts point of view, it looks like it. I'm sure that there are people that say Cox is talking nonsense, but just I am comparing it to a really halcyon time in the 60s when we didn't have any money. We had less money now, but there was social mobility like I've not seen, and has sort of slowly over the years shut down.
And when we come back, I'm going to be talking to Brian Cox about how he broke through in the theatre and how he has now become this astonishing international superstar.
Welcome back. Alex is in conversation with the two most famous men to hail from Dundee. Media magnate Logan Roy from the series Succession, played by Brian Cox.
I'm speaking to Brian Cox, Logan Roy, about his new autobiography, Putting the Rabbit in the Hat. Brian Cox, that title, The Rabbit in the Hat, where did that come from?
Well, it comes from when we did Tamburlaine the Great all those years ago. It was the opening production of the new National Theatre on the South Bank. And there'd been a lot of strikes and a lot of delays. And we'd ended up doing other plays in the middle. And we were doing the whole thing. It lasted 7 months, which was a long time. So anyway, we come back to rehearsals and we're having difficulty with the play because it's very rhetorical, Tamburlaine. It's all big speeches. So we're having difficulty there are 3 kings who are attendant lords to Tamburlaine. And so Finney was saying, come on, lads, come on. It's, you know what it's like. You just get the rabbit out of the hat. That's all we do. We get the rabbit out of the hat. And my friend, great friend, Oliver Cotton, he said, yeah, but Albert, how do we get the rabbit into the hat in the first place? And so that's why I got the title Putting the Rabbit in the Hat, because it's all very well, you know, what you see, but there's the process of actually how we get the rabbit into the hat.
So Brian, I mean, after all these great roles in movies and films and now in the series, of course, do you still regard yourself as a theatre actor at root? I mean, is that your first and great love?
Well, actually, if I'm absolutely honest, my first and great love was the movies, because that was the sort of, you know, that was the beginning of a kind of, you know, when you're a kid. When I was a kid, I used to go to the pictures. You know, we used to have double features. And we had, in my hometown in Dundee, we had 21 cinemas at one time. And I visited them all from the age of, I started going to pictures when the films, the cinema, when I was about, when I was about 5, I started to go on my own, which is unheard of now. And we had double features so that, you know, you start at 6 o'clock, you get 2 pictures, and it'll be 3 days, and there was 2 cinemas opposite one another. And so you could see as many as 8 movies in a week. And I always kind of was attracted by it. It was always the American stuff that I really loved. And I used to, you know, talk in American accent when I was about 5. But of course, what happens to you when you start learning the business of acting is you're introduced to the extraordinary world of the theatre, and particularly the extraordinary world of Shakespeare, who is singularly the greatest writer of plays ever. So in a way, it distracts you. You follow the line of a theatre career. And I followed that line, you know, till I was in my mid-40s. And I thought, wow, I've done that. But then I felt I had exhausted it. I had no less respect. I've always got huge respect, and I still want to do theatre. But in the end, I thought, you know, this is a time for me to go further into the cinema. And at that time, there wasn't a great cinema industry here. I mean, there was television. There's always been television, but there wasn't a great cinema industry. So I decided to take myself off to Hollywood. And I did. You know, it wasn't a happy decision, but I thought I need to, you know, because you have to reinvent yourself after a while. You know, you can't always paddle the same boat. So I went and I decided that, having been a leading actor in the theatre, I decided I would become a character actor.
But then, did you have to invent yourself as the first Hannibal Lecter on screen?
Well, no, I got that. Actually, ironically, I got that through a theatre appearance. I did a play about Northern Ireland, a brilliant play by Ron Hutchison, which I did in New York, called Rat in the Skull. And it was actually Brian Dennehy, the actor Brian Dennehy, who had been offered the role of Hannibal Lecter, but he felt it was not his role because he thought he was too big and too imposing. You know, he's gone now, sadly. He was a dear friend. And so he recommended me to Michael Mann. Now, Michael Mann never heard of me, didn't know what I was, but he had this brilliant casting director called Bonnie Timmerman. And Bonnie came to see me in the play and was completely blown away by my performance, which was very flattering. But so when I went for the film audition with my friend Philip Jackson, who played the other characters, he played Will Graham, he was my voice off. We arrived there and she said, I don't want to see you. And I went, what? She said, I don't really want to see you. I said, why? She said, well, when I got to the theatre, I was late and I couldn't, my seat was in a very bad position. I could only hear you. And it was your voice. I was just transfixed by your voice. So I started the whole thing with my back to the camera, which is actually what I do in the film. I mean, if you look at one Lecter, you know, Tony Hopkins, he stands right in the middle of the set, you know, meeting Clarice. But I had my back, and I had my back to the camera, and I was like that, and then I turned. So that's what happened, and that's what, you know, that's how I became Hannibal Lecter. And of course, it was a great opportunity for me. But then I had to, you know, I was living in America. I'd just done 2 plays, one after the other. I did a play with it's called Strange Interlude, which I did on Broadway. Then I did this play at the Public. And I was having a great time with it. But then my first marriage was falling apart. And I realized that I'd have to go home because, you know, my kids were needing me. And so I just came back. I didn't follow the American thing then. I came back. And then out of that, I went to Stratford. and probably had the best time of my theatre career at Stratford. It was a great time and playing great roles. I played Titus Andronicus, which was my signature role at the RSC. And then I went on to the National to play King Lear. But I'd reached a point where I thought, I want to shift now. I don't want to become one of those actors who I have huge respect for, like Derek Jacobi, Tony Sher, who did the theatre on a regular basis, Ian McKellen. That wasn't me. So I thought, no, I'm going to go and just be a jobbing working actor. And it was a dangerous decision because I was 50, but it was probably the best decision I ever made.
But known for not just your great talent, but your ferocious work rate. I mean, you achieved in 1995 a notable démarche by starring in both the two Scottish blockbusters of that year, Braveheart and Rob Roy. I mean, how did you get off with that, Brian? Did you tell Rob Roy you were in Braveheart and vice versa?
Well, I remember I was doing Rob Roy. I infinitely preferred Alan Sharp's script of Rob Roy to the kind of strange Braveheart, which I thought, because I actually played Wallace. I'd played Wallace on the television some years before. And it was, that script was a complete fantasy, but, it was very entertaining. And of course, from a Scots Wahé position, it was pretty incredible. And, but the better script I thought was Rob Roy. And I was doing Rob Roy, and then Mel was desperate. He wanted me to be in Braveheart. So he said, well, why can't you? I said, Mel, I really want to do this. Because ironically, Mel Gibson was actually offered Rob Roy before he was offered the film thing. And actually, he'd be rather good at Rob Roy because he's actually physically the right height. It's ironic that Liam Neeson should have played Wallace because Wallace was very, very tall. And Rob Roy, of course, had, he had rickets and was small and redheaded, Anyway, he played, and Liam played Rob Roy. So I told the people, I said, and Mel, he kind of begged me, he said, I really want you to be in the film.
I'm trying to imagine that role reversal, Brian. Reversing Mel Gibson and Liam Neeson. But you're in the book, you're very complimentary about Mel Gibson. He's had a rough time in recent years, but you see him as a great actor and a rather great human being.
I do. I mean, it's as sick as you can find, and Mel's got problems. There's no question about it, but he is not a bad man. He really isn't a bad man. And I will defend him because I know him and I know about his generosity. I've seen him deal with actors who've had problems with the alcohol, and he was magnificent. He was always generous and kind and caring. I have great compassion for Mel.
So Brian Cox, a humble background, a Labour supporter, long-term socialist. What turned you towards the idea of Scottish independence and becoming a strong figure in the Yes campaign of 2014? Was there any single policy, or was it more a sense of change and social direction?
Well, it was, it seemed that social democracy was absent from the country, except up north. And also Iraq and a certain person's behavior with the government of the United States, when clearly everybody knows it was, there were no weapons of mass destruction. And we knew that Dick Cheney was really, it was all about Halliburton. It was all about the oil. And I just thought, nobody can they not see the avarice of that? We've caused such, I think that the Middle East was very finely balanced anyway. And we've caused such mayhem. And I was so angry about that and the hubris of Tony in many ways dealing with that. So I just thought I felt I was bereft because I was the voice of Labour in the 1997 election, and I was so Labour-minded. I just really believed in the party big time. But I saw the party slowly getting sold down the river, and I don't think the party's recovered, quite frankly. I really don't. And I think it's tragic because I still, in my heart, I'm a socialist. So therefore, I don't know. But also, we live in the UK in a very feudal system. Everybody in their place. A lot of this goes on, forelock tugging. It's still there. And it's a bit more allegory-like, but it's still there. And I found that really unacceptable. And I thought, when do we move on? When do we move on? And I looked at my country, I looked at Scotland, who I've always had a very complicated relationship with. And I thought, they're getting it right. There's something about what's going on in Scotland, they're getting it right. And I just felt that I had to shift my allegiance. And it was very painful, very tough to do that. But I was really worried about these islands, and I was worried particularly about, and and Scotland had so much of the history of Scotland, especially in recent times, they always got the tap end of the bath as far as things were concerned. And I was I kind of get a bit fed up of it, and it suddenly got to me, that, and it really is a question of, my country right or wrong. I just felt that that's where I had to, because because of the Celtic thing, I just felt that was my allegiance. And I had to give that allegiance. It was difficult for me because I remember in the 90s, I used to laugh at you, Alex. I used to laugh at Sean, the idea of Sean possibly becoming the president of Scotland. And I thought, well, surely you can't be president of Sean Connery. It won't work. But no, I mean, in the end, it was a journey that I had to take. It was a tough and hard journey, but I haven't regretted it. I still think there are huge problems back home, huge problems. I was up there recently, and there's a lot of now party political politicizing. I was on Question Time, and that I just was very shocked by, but because of the desperate times that we're in,
Now, one last question about Logan Roy. I've been watching this. I mean, it suddenly occurred to me after something you'd said in an interview that he doesn't just do vulgar fractions. He does very short sentences. I mean, there's not going to be many soliloquies playing Logan Roy, is there, Brian?
No. That's in my old age, that's a great blessing. The fact that he is monosyllabic.
Brian Cox, thank you so much for lots of luck with the autobiography, and thank you so much for joining me again on the Alex Salmond Show.
Thank you, Alex. It's a pleasure to talk to you.
Brian Cox's autobiography couldn't have been better timed. Many stars get asked for selfies. Few are asked by their adoring fans to swear at them. The one thing that Cox and Logan Roy do have in common is that they are self-made men who take no nonsense and few prisoners. That is reflected in Cox's trenchant but humorous memoir on the characters he has encountered in his rags to riches story. Other than that, they would disagree on just about everything. Brian Cox's view on life, show business and politics will always find a ready audience on this programme. And so from Alex, myself and all at the show, thank you for watching, stay safe, and we'll see you all again next week.